Welcome back. Before going to the break, we were talking about the dossier that government of Pakistan has released, and that actually contains the various instances of India's violations of human rights in Kashmir, and the way India actually does it reminds you of various genocides. This is, ladies and gentlemen, a genocide that is going on in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and it actually reminded us of Rwanda and umpteen other also. The Rwandan genocide spanned over just 100 days. April 1994 to July 1994, while the Bosnian War lasted for 3 years, 1992 to 1995. The conflict in IIOJK, on the other hand, is still continuing even 100 years later. Since 1947, over 400,000 people have been killed by the Indian occupational forces. That's 4 times more than those killed in Bosnia and about half of those killed in Rwanda. This is in spite of 11 UN resolutions having passed on IIOJK over the span of 75 years, compared to 7 UN resolutions related to the Bosnian and 5 UN resolutions on the Rwandan genocide. So there's a lot to worry about and a lot to reflect here. Let me come to the studio. Brigadier Saab, you must have gone through the entirety of the dossier. It is a great step that the government of Pakistan has not only documented this, but released it in a very timely fashion. What next? What do we do now?
It's a very good step, and in fact, a combination of diplomacy and lawfare was required, and government has taken the timely step. You see, this is evidence which has been very painstakingly gathered. And when you go to the international fora and you want to use lawfare as an offensive option,
Right.
you got to follow the right channels and the right fora.
Okay. Can you identify them?
Yes, there are several forums like General Assembly, Human Rights Council. Then you can invoke ICERD, Convention of Elimination of Racial Discrimination.
Right. And where do we go actually to get relief?
You go to the
ICJ or ICC?
No, not ICJ and ICC. There are separate forums.
Okay.
You can go, like I said, that you can take it to the office of High Commissioner for Human Rights. You can take it to Human Rights Council. You can take it to General Assembly, and you have to package this into right categories.
Okay.
You see, whether you are trying to package these as human rights violations, war crimes, or the crimes against humanity. There are very major differences between the 3 categories, and interestingly, in the Indian depredations in IIOJK, they span the entire gamut of human rights abuses, war against, crime against humanity, and war crimes.
Right.
Unconsented and effective occupation of a state to which a force does not have the sovereign title. It is treated as occupation, and the army which occupies is an occupation army.
Right.
So we have to establish legally that IIOJK is under occupation,
Right.
and if it is under occupation, then it merits the violation of the human rights abuses. It becomes war crimes.
Right.
Because
it does. And the concern at this moment is that it is world's highest military deployment. There hasn't been a bigger deployment. That is not all. India is now even using cluster bombs across LOC. So what else do we need to make these cases? They are there.
You see, they are there, but you have to properly identify you have to properly institute
We must be doing it already.
we are not doing it because how it needs to be done is that there, a proper investigation has to be instituted through a legal statute. For instance, our area study centers, our universities, their vice chancellors have the mandate legally. So it has to be, this investigation has to be instituted as a legal entity, and you have to identify the perpetrators, and you have to identify the evidence, and the evidence to be given by those witnesses, those who can depose in a court of law.
Right.
So it has to be done very
and we are going to further talk about it. Let me bring in the resident Kashmiri professor here. He's an expert in his own right. Dr. Saab, we are talking about these aspects, right? When India actually abrogated 370, when it actually did away with 35A, at that time, if you remember, our impression was that whatever India is doing will actually stand out and the world will react. Media did. But the pace with which India keeps on increasing these atrocities, and every day they invent a new torture, that seems to be staggering, and yet the silence is stupefying simultaneously. What is happening here?
True. I mean, it was very much obvious. I mean, the report which says about the different types of the torture and the human rights violations. But let me begin with
children are being blinded.
But let me tell you one important thing, that it's just the tip of iceberg. If you see the entire reports that have been published internationally, I mean, if you see Human Rights Watch, if you see Doctors Without Border, I mean, they have published report in 2010 and 16 as well about the mental and psychological impact of this, brutal occupation on young people particularly. It was alarming the way, I mean, more than 50-60% young people are in a psychological distress and that trauma actually, particularly in that condition. See, one of the important things that we missed during the entire phase, what I feel is that we could have invested more energies to understand and deconstruct the actual impact and the method and the instruments that have been used to occupy and suppress Kashmiris. Human rights violation, of course, but in different manifestation when we say, I mean, there was a report on structures of violence, like reports and all these things that have been published. I mean, if you see the overall framework, I mean, that was something that we need to educate our people here and understand that was very much structured. It's not only occupying land, but it's how they have, totally sort of occupied this psychological, social, economic and other aspects of the people by using brutal force. The problem is, I guess it's the problem of documentation. A society which is under, worst crisis of occupation, you have very limited avenues. You have to survive as well. You have to, I mean, for your life at least, you have to survive. You cannot document those things. Even we have to salute the human rights workers and people and activists.
We do that. But my concern is, first, it wasn't my channel, it wasn't Pakistani publication, it was BBC that kept on documenting since 2014 the blinded children because of the pellet guns, and that continued, and it was a really harrowing scene, right? Then comes a picture where a child, a toddler, is sitting on the dead body of his uncle, and it has been actually shown to the world. Similarly, umpteen other things are happening. First, they change the status of Kashmir, and now they are trying to demographically change it as well. With that kind of, malice, when they are doing it, how much are you going to document? Someday you have to ask people to do something about it.
No, absolutely. I don't mean that we need not to say. We need to, of course, push the international world as well. But my idea is that even, when there is a certain framing of the news, particularly when it goes to the Western media. I must say that when you say that the children have been blinded, pelleted, I guess this entire story could have been told in a more fair and objective way. Pakistan has tried that, but I guess there's a lot of work that needed to be done to introduce to the Western world, particularly to the people who believe in human rights values and the values of democracy and peace and justice, particularly, that I think so, in the Western academic circles and policy think tanks as well. Of course, there is a knowledge, but not a very detailed knowledge, because one of the factors that India is, of course, due to its diaspora and of course its economic and other might, they try to cover it up and try to make this
Indian diaspora doesn't believe that Kashmiris are human beings.
I mean, at least
That their children will be blinded, will have the same kind of hopeless future.
Because
any child anywhere.
see, that's a fundamental question to their society, and their people, those who live in the Western society, believe in their democratic values and rights, that this equally applies to the people of Jammu and Kashmir as well. So my idea is that we need to consistently not only document but also have advocate and develop an art of storytelling, that what is actually happening over there. And just one last thing. I mean, see,
I totally get it, what you're saying. My concern is, while this is going on, and India has proven itself to be a nuisance, what is happening then? Narendra Modi is going to attend the Quad meeting. That kind of disconnect from the values you actually yourself profess. You're a democracy. Democracy believes by definition in human rights. So nobody is taking care of
that. So I have a question on a larger scale. Once you have people and leadership like this, there's a very obvious impact, a short-term and long-term as well.
Yeah.
So do you think that India over the period of time got stabilized? There is a more political freedom over there? You think the society is more harmonized after suppressing Kashmiris? It didn't happen.
No, but
even if you see the region,
I totally get what you're saying, and I understand that there are going to be long-term consequences. I get it. But my problem is that I'm father of kids, and I am putting myself in the place of that child that was sitting on the dead body of his grandfather, or someone who has been blinded. Time is not going to reverse itself for them.
True.
Brigadier Sahab, you can add to what was being said, but there is another humongous revelation here. ISIS or Daesh is continuously spoken about internationally, and now the government of Pakistan has given its addresses that India is running 5 training camps for Daesh within India. So what are we going to do about that?
You see, this misanthropic creed Hindutva, which is completely devouring India itself, is exporting instability, and the entire world knows why they are ignoring is because of the political reasons. India is a big market. India is a strategic ally.
Right.
So they'll always ignore.
Sorry to cut you, but what you are saying is capitalism beats democracy.
No, I don't say that. What I'm saying is that realpolitik, business, it trumps human rights considerations.
So India,
but there are ways and means.
Sorry to once again. I just wanted to hone that answer. I just want to understand that if India is violating human rights and principles of democracy, it is a big, fat milking cow, and that's why they're going to actually work with it. China is even bigger. Then why would you actually care what happens in China?
That is why we need to proceed very, very, intelligently. We have to strike where you asked the question about the pressure points from Ambassador
and you also.
Munir. Yeah. So we have those. We know those pressure points. There's a international conscience embedded in academia, in human rights, civil society organizations. We know there's a mechanism, instrument called BDS, which was used very effectively by Palestinians: boycott, divestments, and sanctions.
Yeah.
And believe you me,
but now Israel actually calls it some enemies of civilization.
But it's resonating well with the civil society and academia of the world. People like Stephen Hawking and Richard Dawkins, they were converts to this idea, and when they started criticizing and distancing, the impact was felt. And when the cosmetics giant OAVA of Israel was going to sanctions, so it created this impact, because this is pandering, or this is appealing to the conscience of civil society organizations, academia, and the banking systems.
Right.
And BDS is effective too.
Ambassador,
Then there are
Brigadier Sir, this was an argument that we actually discussed in 2014 when Narendra Modi actually unleashed all these horrors in Kashmir, right? Children were being blinded. And Pakistan kept on pushing for it, international fora, meeting people, civil society. But then India evicts actually amnesty people as well, declaring them persona non grata.
now, a very good question. The answer to this is we must invest more. We must invest more by way of intellectual capital, by way of material resources. We must buttress our lawfare structure. We must create a very strong organization of international law expertise in foreign affairs division, in law ministry, in AJK ministry,
Right.
and use those channels. You see, it's not only human rights abuses. We need to conflate those with crimes against humanity, because when it gets elevated to crime against humanity,
Right.
which means that human rights abuses are as per a systematic and concerted manner,
Right.
and they are being done in a manner that is systematic. So crime against humanity has no legal remedy under domestic
Right.
courts also.
Right.
So that's another point. Then
Yeah,
the
but-
universal jurisdiction, there are domestic laws of
But
countries.
the consensus that I got from listening to all of you is that because India is so powerful, international system means nothing at this moment. And that actually brings me back to Dr. Kausar. Dr. Saab, as a Kashmiri, and of course we all are human beings, what Kashmiris are going through, I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemies, right? But this actually brings us back to the question of morality in the international system. Is it relevant at all? Or human beings, and I'm talking about thousands, hundreds of thousands of people being blinded, maimed, picked up, disappeared. There's not going to be any kind of karma for them.
I mean, this is a big, thank you for raising this question, particularly of morality aspect, because in the international global order, there have been a lot of talks about this moral and liberal values, particularly when it comes to Kashmir. I mean, there's a big question mark, because given the nature of conflict one, and then given the nature of violations that happened over there, I mean, there's a big question on the international system and global order.
Sure.
Particularly, there is one point when we all keep on saying that maybe India is so powerful that no one is listening or maybe paying any heed. I still have a hope. I still have a hope on two things. One, particularly, this is a very just political moment of people that their lives have been laid. People say 400. Someone was saying that 100,000 people have laid their lives. I
Yeah.
guess if you start from 47, around 0.5 million people only were massacred in Jammu,
Right.
particularly where Muslim majority was converted into. Now it is
Right.
now is the other way around.
Yeah.
Now I personally think that Kashmiris, one of the thing that we need to see that over the period of 73 years, despite having so many critical times, downfalls, curfews, 5th of August and all these things, Kashmiris still are resisting. Kashmiris still are there.
Right. But now Indian government actually plans to bring about this demographic shift by converting Kashmiris, as you have pointed out. In Jammu they did it. Now they plan to do it in the entirety of Kashmir.
See,
By bringing outliers,
Yes.
settling them there and killing these people off.
I guess this is the fundamental responsibility we need to engage world on this, particularly on demographic changes. One, because this is a crime. I mean, this is a
It
disputed
has been
territory.
72
No,
years.
one.
How
Legally-
further do we have to go?
Legally, it's post 5th of August. Before that, there was state subject rule. It was sort of protected. But after that,
I didn't mention Jammu's massacre, you did.
Yes.
And it was before that.
That was actually when the mass migration happened. It happened, but my fundamental point is, of course, this is one of the areas which we need to document, not only document but sensitize people about the change. But on the other side, I must say, if you see what India has gained after 5th of August, I don't see anything. I mean, territory belongs to people. It's fundamental about
Yeah,
people.
but Modi is using Kashmir to actually bolster his Hindutva and hardline credentials within India. And the longer and the stronger he is,
They have been using...
more atrocities are going to be there.
Yes, they have been using Kashmir in past for their political gains, short political gains. It didn't happen. I have just one more question. I guess if it's a way of approaching as well. If the world is unanimously agreed on, let's suppose there's a new mantra of sustainable development goals where people and world wants that they should have a, they have the shared and agreed goals. I mean, their goal number 14 is all about peace, justice, and security.
Out of the window.
So if you see...
all money.
But that's what I'm saying, they've agreed. All of us agreed on that.
Yeah.
So it has to be, seen that in the regional context as well, that not only justice in Kashmir or peace in Kashmir, or justice, what we mean is that their self-determination, but it is also, jeopardizing the peace of the entire region.
Right.
So you cannot have a global agenda fulfilled even in this region if you cannot solve these conflicts.
And you're absolutely right. I've been warned twice or thrice that we have actually overshot the allotted time. I have to conclude the program here. Brigadier Sahab, thank you very much, sir, for your precious time. Dr. Sahab, thank you very much as well. Viewers, one aspect which is very interesting, since the U.S. actually withdrew from Afghanistan, within past 1 month, Western media has gone haywire, talking about what a bad mistake it was and how all Afghans are prone to human rights violations, which they are, and I'm not complaining about it. On the other side, Kashmir, this theater has been going on for 73 years, and now it has become totally intolerable. And yet, not a peep on these matters. If you want to care about Afghanistan, if you want to care about other people elsewhere in the region, then for heaven's sake, start paying attention to the Kashmiris as well, because whether you like it or not, they are also human beings. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.